What's up, guys? It is Ben with Ben's Election Predictions, and today we are going to do a deep dive into the state of Iowa, which I think will be the most important state in the 2024 GOP primary season. And you might think why? Iowa's a very, small state. It's kind of in the middle of the country. Well, the reason why it's the most important is the first primary, and presidential primaries are all based on momentum. You can see as many polls as you want to, but really when when the primary season gets started is when the first votes are cast, or in the case of Iowa, it's an Iowa caucus. So it's a little bit different than a primary because it requires more organization and ground game and coalition building than a traditional primary where you simply um, have a secret ballot in the ballot box. So let's dive in. So when is the Iowa caucus going to happen? So it's actually moved up this year to January 15th, which is a little bit earlier than when it has been in past cycles. Like in 2016, it was on February 1st. So, um, Iowa moved up. And I really do think that January 15th will be the most important day of the GOP primary, because I think we're going to find out whether Donald Trump's going to win all 50 states, like he's projected to do right now, or if it will be a more competitive primary. So, just to kind of dive into what I think my predictions are. This is where I'm currently sitting on my predictions. Obviously, Iowa historically has just gone crazy. Like where we were in the 2016 cycle right now, Ben Carson was leading in the polls, and obviously, he came in fourth. So this is, definitely much subject to change. But I think we've seen in this primary more than others that there hasn't been as much movement as we've seen in the past. So looking at my first predictions here, I think you might be surprised that Trump's only at 40%. Well, if you look at the polls, um, ooh, I forgot to get an average up here. This is a little bit embarrassing. Um, Maybe we can get an average right here on the race to the White House. But Trump is at around 45%, and that's been pretty consistent in a lot of polls. And even in August and September, he was even lower than that. Um, and in the most recent poll, which got a lot of attention, and this is typically the most accurate pollster, the Seltzer poll. It is listed as the gold standard. Um, this was just released, and Seltzer, um, and it had the headline of the poll was very negative for DeSantis and very good for Nikki Haley, and then also pretty good for Trump because he's holding his support at 45%. But I do want to go into kind of the nitty gritty of this poll, and then use it as kind of a jumping off point of what I think Iowa will be all about. So this is just kind of the headline of the poll in graphical form. In the last poll, Ron DeSantis was at about 19%, so he has fallen, and Nikki Haley definitely saw the most improvement, and Tim Scott also went down. Donald Trump has hung around steady. So if you do add up the long tail of like non-Trump candidates, you will see that it would be higher than Trump. That's not going to happen. Recently we just saw Mike Pence drop out. He was actually included in these polls, and they just took the Pence voters and said who's your second most likely to candidate vote for, and added it to them. I assume most of those votes probably went to Chris Christie or Nikki Haley. Mike Pence has not announced that he's going to has intentions to endorse anyone yet, but if I had to speculate, it probably would be Nikki Haley if he did, or he just might not endorse now. Then probably endorse Donald Trump against Joe Biden again. Like I mean, even after what happened on January 6th, Mike Pence was, a loyal vice president to Donald Trump. So, um, anyway, so this is kind of the main quote that Ann Seltzer kind of did. So you just have Haley rising, you have DeSantis kind of holding on for second place, but both of them are on ground that you could only describe as shaky compared to the solid ground that Donald Trump stands on. And I think some of the other graphs and graphics here will kind of show that. So you can definitely see that Nikki Haley has risen up. Ron DeSantis has stayed pretty steady, declined a little bit, and Donald Trump stayed pretty steady and even increased. And the reason why Ann Seltzer characterized um, the race this way is because look at the difference between Trump, DeSantis, and Haley potential voters. Trump voters extremely enthusiastic, very enthusiastic. While DeSantis and Haley, it's a little bit more tepid. Maybe they haven't made their mind up. And I think there's another graphic down here that will kind of go to show this. Trump voters' mind is made up. And so if you actually do the math, 0.63 times 43, you get to a number around like 27, 28%. So this is like Trump's floor. This is the least amount of support he can get. If you do that same exercise for DeSantis and Nikki Haley, it gets them even lower to about like 5 or 6%. And I think we've seen, Trump's support is, very rock solid. He's obviously not going to drop out. I also don't expect DeSantis and Haley to drop out. But I think one key piece of information you can take from this poll is that Trump's floor is 27%. So if any candidate is going to beat him, they're going to need to at least get over the 27% number and probably higher. Because we see, Trump's currently at 43%. And neither Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis are close to that 27%. And you can see, if Trump's in the race, they're like that 63%. It's Trump all the way. He's my hero. Him and Jesus are my heroes. There's no amount of campaigning or ground game that's going to be able to untie that support that, some candidates have for Donald Trump. And, I'm sure on the ground, the DeSantis and Haley teams have run into that a lot. However, one thing I do think is pretty interesting. So if Donald Trump does start to stumble, which, he has a history of, talking off the cuff. He was just in Sioux City the other day in Iowa and addressed the crowd like they were in Sioux Falls, which is in South Dakota. I don't know if the crowd would take offense to that, or if, Iowa voters, really have a axe to grind with, the Sioux Falls and Sioux City distinction. I'm sure they don't, but, there is the potential that Trump could fall, from his 43 to maybe around 35. Is it super likely that he falls that much? Probably not. But where are those votes going to go for? Well, I think this graphic does a pretty good job of saying it. So if voters are going to switch, you can see that, they have they're actively considering Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis at the same level. And so I think that does speak to, Ron DeSantis' ceiling. So we've talked about Donald Trump's floor, but what is the ceiling for these other candidates? So at Nikki Haley, it's 54%. But for Ron DeSantis, it's 67%. Is he going to get anywhere close to this number? No. Is he even going to get, a combination of his first and second place voting? No. But it shows that, with persuasion, with ground game, knocking on doors, making phone calls, uh, going to churches, campaigning there hard, that there could be some wiggle room here because not everyone has made their mind up. They're actively considering other candidates. Also, what's going to be interesting is if any of these candidates drop out. So obviously Mike Pence has dropped out. Ryan Binkley and Asa Hutchinson will likely drop out, I think. Doug Burgum could likely drop out. Where are those votes going to go to? Really unsure. They're so small anyway, it's probably not going to have a super big impact. If Tim Scott drops out, that will actually definitely, have a big impact. I do not expect him to drop out. He's going all in on Iowa, like Ron DeSantis is. That is his strategy. If Tim Scott does drop out, I do expect that would help Nikki Haley and maybe Ron DeSantis some. I don't expect Vivek Ramaswamy to drop out, but I actually think that would probably only improve Trump's positioning because they have a lot of voters in common. So I know I just threw a lot of numbers at you. And also, the last thing that I want to say, I don't think any other candidates besides Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley, and maybe Tim Scott have a chance of receiving any delegate. So you saw in 2016 that it was pretty split between three candidates. I think this could be pretty similar to what we see in 2024. However, Donald Trump, I think, will be the clear leader. And you can see here, I mentioned that 27, 28% number, and that's what Ted Cruz won with. So even if Donald Trump hits his floor in Iowa, it's still pretty likely with, I'm pretty sure Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are both guaranteed to stay in the race until at least Iowa. And so it's hard for me to see an alternative universe where Donald Trump doesn't win Iowa unless, things drastically change. However, if someone comes in a close second or close third, it will change the trajectory of the race. Some of these other states will start to become more competitive. Candidates will start dropping out. Endorsements will start to fly in. And so, this is where the state of the Iowa caucus is right now. I actually think this is pretty accurate. The only changes I could see is if Nikki Haley does keep the momentum going up, I could see her replace Ron DeSantis for second place. However, I don't think that is as likely as people think because, Ron DeSantis has a lot of money and he's just pouring it into Iowa. And so I'm trying to find the trend lines here. So I think this is about right for right now. And I think, Donald Trump's, as we get closer, if he, maintains his lead, this number will probably even grow. Second place will be pretty interesting. And I think, in the past 30 days, you actually saw Ron DeSantis' numbers grow. And just this one poll, because it has been so accurate in the past, it did really, change the course of this race. And you saw the trading volume was pretty high because, Nikki Haley is surging. In my opinion, I would still bet on Ron DeSantis. One factor that I haven't considered yet is the endorsement of Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa. That will be the most prominent endorsement in Iowa. I think the most influential endorsement in Iowa. I'm curious if it's going to be mentioned in this article. I kind of doubt it will. But that will have an impact, and voters have said in past polls that they do care about the opinion of the governor of Iowa. Will that completely change the race? No. But it looks like that the person that Kim Reynolds would endorse would be Ron DeSantis. If Ron DeSantis has another bad slate of polls, Kim Reynolds might rethink that. But if Ron DeSantis hangs up above 15 percentage points, 15 to 20 percentage points, I could see her endorsing him, and that would raise his poll numbers to 20 and 25%. But you can see that, Nikki Haley clearly has the trend line going up. I don't think that's going to be sustainable to continue because the votes have to come from somewhere. And I think, Ron DeSantis is going to hang out in second place. So let me know what y'all think of my predictions here. Obviously, especially right now, the race is going to be it changes so quickly day to day with the news cycles, with the debates, and it's almost a fool's errand to predict this far in advance. Ben Carson was number one in the same exact poll last year, or in 2015 when the poll was conducted, and there have been quotes that Iowa voters really only start paying attention 6 to 8 weeks out, which we aren't even there yet. And there's still a lot of time for those ad dollars to go in, and persuasion to happen. And 27% of the electorate is rock solid in Donald Trump's camp. Nothing's gonna be able to change their mind. But the other 73 of voters are up for grabs. So that's why you see all this money flowing into Iowa, because I do think it's going to be the most important state, and I actually think it's a good strategy by the campaign. So let me know what y'all thought of this video, whether you agree with me or not. Leave a thumbs up, drop a comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you guys, and I'll see y'all later.